So it is April 2nd, 2023, week 5 of our series on housing and social justice. Welcome, everyone. As we've been doing for the last few weeks, we're starting with a brief overview of the series, an introduction of our 2 hosts for this series, an opening poem. We have a guest reader for the poem and have some wonderful guest speakers and presentations. We'll break by 4:45 for small group discussions and then come back for a closing discussion and reading. So here's where we've been. We started with the overview, had presentations from Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and Arlington Community Foundation, talked about racial disparities, and had a couple presentations for that series. Refugees and immigrant housing, seniors and persons with disabilities. We've been focusing on the problem. What is the challenge of affordable housing? So this week we start to pivot to what are some of the solutions? What is being done to address the affordable housing crisis? And today we're going to talk about government agencies and their partners and how they are addressing housing challenges. And I'll say it again at the end of the class, but we have no meeting next week. We're going to skip for Easter and then come back and talk about advocacy. I have a couple great speakers for that, and then some faith leadership models. So the hosts today are Virginia Diocesan Homes. We are a related organization to the Episcopal Diocese of Virginia. We're actually the organization that helped to found Goodwin House and a number of the Westminster Canterbury senior homes around the state. We are a nonprofit and we have 14 board members. 3 of us are on the call today, maybe 4. I haven't seen Kathy logged in yet. And our co-host here and organizer for all the Zoom and the Eventbrite is St. George's Episcopal Church. And I'd like to ask Eric Fontaine, a member of St. George's, to introduce St. George's.
Thank you very much, Nina. St. George's Episcopal Church sits on a square island there near Boston, Virginia Square Metro. And I started coming here about a dozen years ago and joined as a member in the first year, and have certainly found it to be an opening and welcoming church environment. As it says on the screen, an inclusive and vibrant community of varying ages and backgrounds. And I think the fact that it's located nearby means people who don't wish to drive can also find their way to our church.
Thank you, Eric. We thought, again, as we have been for past weeks, we wanted to start with a poem reading that Eric has selected for us.
This poem is by Langston Hughes. It's titled, I Look at the World. And it says, I look at the world from awakening eyes and a black face. And this is what I see. This fenced off narrow space assigned to me. I look then at the silly walls through dark eyes and a dark face. And this is what I know, that all these walls, oppression bills, will have to go. I look at my own body with eyes no longer blind, and I see that my own hands can make the world that's in my mind. Then let us hurry, comrades, the road to find.
Thank you, Eric. Hopefully we're on that road.
We are.
So we have 3 wonderful presenters today. Andrew Friedman, Andy, is now a consultant, but a former housing director for the city of Virginia Beach, Virginia. Has a long career there and lots to share with us about how they worked on affordable housing. Thought it'd be helpful to kind of have a little variety here in terms of our jurisdictions. Senator Barbara Favola is an amazing public servant. She's worked for 12 years on the Arlington County Board and another dozen in the state Senate, and a real progressive leader on housing issues, but all kinds of issues for families. And then I've actually put myself back into the agenda to talk a little bit about nonprofit partners that work with government agencies. So we'll hear from 3 different perspectives, the elected, the public agency, and the partner side. And I'll let Andy jump right in.
Great, thank you, Nina. Nina said, I'm Andy Friedman. I'm just getting a message. My internet connection is unstable. I hope you can hear me. And so we'll just go right ahead. I have an organization called Progressive Housing Solutions, and most of this presentation is based on my background. I lived in Ohio, San Francisco, Green Bay, Wisconsin, but 37 years here at Virginia Beach. I've worked at American Red Cross in the past in Wisconsin. As Nina said, I was 28 years director at the city. Interesting things we did there was we cooperated with 3 other jurisdictions around us and together built 400 units of regional supported housing, where one city would actually subsidize housing in another city, or two other cities in one case would do that. I also was lucky enough to development and serve for 4 years, and I've been consulting since October 2021. So next slide. Whoops. Okay. So affordable housing is many different things. And we talk about how governments, especially local governments, can make affordable housing happen. It's not just one thing that we need to work on. And so there's lots of different things local governments can do. It's all not just big developments. You can make a lot of progress on small packages. And I think the idea is figure out what needs to be done and do it. Don't just have a program or two, but just figure out what works for the people you're working with, who brings value to the project, and do that. So we'll go right into the meat of it. So I said there are a lot of types of affordable housing. You can have new construction and existing housing. You can have single family, multifamily, or any number, and it can all be affordable. Or you can have a mixed use development with commercial uses in the same development. You can have a nonprofit developer, which Nina's going to talk about. You can have a for-profit developer, and governments and housing authorities also develop affordable housing. You can serve just the general population, a specific limited population. I know you've talked about some of those, and lots of developments have multiple types of people who are able to take advantage of the opportunities. Same thing with income levels. You can have single or mixed income levels, and some also have market rate and affordability within them. And as far as financing, it's not just one type of money. You can have capital investment, tax credits, rental subsidies, bond financing, all different types of funding that make affordable housing happen. And so because of all those things that, all those different types of housing, there are multiple things that local governments can do. And I think really laying the groundwork for everything is the permissive land use, or the ability to rezone land that permits the housing that wants to be developed to go. That means that's the basic fundamental system of what allows housing to happen. From there, governments can provide financing, help developers obtain other funding. So a lot of what we need to do is write letters to other agencies who have the other funding that makes affordable housing happen, especially HUD and Virginia Housing. We can provide ongoing support. We can build infrastructure, especially parking, streets, and drainage, which can be expensive. And if the government participates in that, it reduces the cost of those developments. A lot of what we also do is help people find sites, or you guys up in Northern Virginia, make government-owned land available a lot. Also, we can provide incentives, cost reductions, or tax reductions. A lot of that has been done. The speed of how we review and approve affordable housing developments is really
Oh dear. Andy, I think you've frozen on us. if you can't unfreeze in the next couple of seconds, what I might do is pivot to Senator Favola's presentation, and then we'll come back. If that's all right with you, Senator Favola.
Sure. Actually, this is a great slide for,
Oh, you want me to leave it up? I can do that.
yeah, that might be helpful. Because then I can add the state perspective. Many of you might not know this, but in our Virginia Constitution, the authority for all land use is actually granted to local governments. And myself and other lawmakers reinforce that authority. It's really important that zoning and land use issues really remain with the local government, and the review process for projects remain with the local government and not have some interference from the state. So having said that, local government can be very creative in how they facilitate the creation of affordable housing. Some localities actually have public housing authorities. Many localities do not, and they work through partners, private partners. Some are nonprofit, some are profit-making partners to actually create the affordable housing. And this is frequently done using incentives such as providing bonus density. So if a developer, the theory here is if a developer is going to acquire something of value, like additional density, where they can, maybe build floors of units that have a view and might be marketable at a higher rate, that's a public value, then the locality can expect, we call it a negotiation rather than a requirement, the locality can negotiate a contribution to an affordable housing fund, perhaps, or actually the development of some affordable housing units within that project. And how you define affordable actually can be quite broad. We have individuals that perhaps are at 30% of the median income and really have no place they can go because of their low income. And we want them to not be homeless. So in those situations, we have a developer who's buying down the cost of production because they're getting this bonus density. And then frequently, rental subsidies have to be used either from the state. The state has some rental subsidy programs. Those are targeted to individuals, such as individuals with disabilities or veterans. And in Arlington's case, Arlington actually has a locally funded housing subsidy program that can help defray the rent. And then, of course, there's the HUD project-based subsidies, which localities can access. So for your very lowest income individuals, you need all of those revenue streams, if you will, to really make living affordable, to make housing affordable. And then as you go up the median income spectrum, individuals at 60% of the median income. And in the statistical area that Arlington is in, 60% of the median income is about $53,000 for a family of four. And that, again, is very difficult. It's very difficult to find a market rate unit that would be able to comfortably house a family of four and be affordable. So again, you can negotiate with the developer to provide units that might reach that target. And then you can go all the way up to what we would call the workforce housing, which is usually families, again, with the Arlington statistical median income would be 120% of, would be 120% of the median income. So, and that sort of brings in maybe, 2 police officers, 2 teachers, 2 emergency workers, and there may be early in their career, and combined, they're perhaps making 120% of the median income, which might be, between maybe $80,000 to $100,000. And again, it would be very difficult without some subsidy to be able to provide housing for a family for. And there are other ways local governments can reduce the cost of the production of housing. I know when I was on the county board, Nina came to me and they were renovating a project, a nonprofit, the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing was renovating a cluster of sort of low-rise apartments. I think it was on Columbia Pike. And Nina felt that we should really change our parking ratio. And we did. The county board, the governing body, did adopt an ordinance that changed the parking ratio for units that were affordable, designated affordable. And we did it based on evidence. Individuals are much less likely to own an automobile if they're at 60% of the median income. And also, this apartment cluster was on a major bus thoroughfare, Columbia Pike. So that helped. Reducing the parking ratio is another, again, tool that can reduce the cost of providing housing. There are opportunities, I guess, to perhaps encourage different zoning models. Arlington has just recently passed this missing middle opportunity, which would provide single-family zoned lots to actually be developed with up to six separate units on them. There is some size limitation. If you get up to six, the lot has to be a certain size. But that, again, is encouraging more supply. Now, these units may not be affordable to the income brackets I discussed, but they would be relatively less expensive than other brand new units that we would call lovingly up here our McMansion, our McMansion single family homes. So that's sort of the general lay of the land. The state's role really is we funnel federal money through low income tax credits, which helps with gap financing for our affordable housing providers. We also have a state trust fund, and we have robustly funded it. I believe there's $145 million left. We've spent some money over the past biennium, but that is a phenomenal amount based on the past history of our funding for that housing trust fund. And again, these dollars can be accessed when a developer submits an application that always has the backing of the locality. So the state is looking to leverage its dollars through partnerships. And we're looking to have the local governmental entity put some skin in the game. And we're looking to get a very good value for our dollar. If those criteria can be met, then the state is more than willing to fund through low income tax credits or additional bridge financing through our trust fund. We want to be able to facilitate more affordable housing. It's an interesting phenomena that in 2000, we had many more units available. For example, there were over 63,000 housing units available throughout the Commonwealth in about 2000. And then 2020, only 34,000 units were being built. So when I said the 63,000, I meant on average each year, 63,000 units were being built between 2000 and maybe up to about 2007 or 8. And then it kept going down each year. And by the time we got to 2020, we were averaging only 34,000 additional units per year. And our population in the Commonwealth was growing. So I'm not sure why our housing supply slowed down rather quickly, especially when we consider the growth in the population. But that definitely has put a premium on the cost of housing. So we need to look at that. We need to look at why. And we're trying to do that, but it's becoming complicated. We have, we're looking at things. Do we perhaps make it easier for modular homes to, come to the market? And what do we have to do from the state perspective in terms of building requirements to make it easier for modular homes to come to the market, and to come quickly? Do we look at tools such as financing single room occupancy models, which we would wait for a nonprofit or a private company, even if they're profit making, to come in with an application and have a locality back that? Single room occupancy would probably look a little bit like a hotel where individuals have their own room and maybe some sitting area, but they share maybe a kitchen and common space. The goal being that these units would be very affordable and we could house many people on a permanent basis in a single room occupancy building. So we have to think creatively, and we have to remember that we are one community, and we can't be afraid to allow new neighbors to come in. And that's a really important message that I think people of faith can carry forward and help individuals, help our neighbors understand.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much. And thanks for jumping in the middle of this. I just got a text from Andy, and he's still working on getting back online. So I'm going to jump in.
Keep talking. Do you want me to keep talking? I have some additional.
Well, okay. Or I was going to say, I could go through some slides that I had prepared, and then we
How
could
would you do that?
Oh, why don't I just tell you a little bit? Barbara's talked about, and Andy too, the challenge of affordable housing is that we're not building enough housing. She talked about the supply is not sufficient, and who gets squeezed out when the supply isn't sufficient? The lowest income. And we've heard about that in prior sessions. Seniors without savings, the very low income essential workers, people with disabilities. So government is partnering with developers to make housing deliberately that's affordable. And it's a mix. There's nonprofits in this space as well as for-profits. And we use federal programs like the low income housing tax credits. We use state programs like the Housing Trust Fund that Barbara talked about. And we use local trust funds. Many municipalities, particularly in Northern Virginia, have their own trust funds. They put money in. So we need both a combination of financial subsidy and land use approvals. I think part of why we're not doing enough development is because, some of us who are already living here are happy not to welcome new neighbors, as Barbara said. So I was very fortunate for 15 years to run the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. It was founded by faith leaders. We heard actually last week that Culpeper Garden was founded by the Unitarian Church. Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing was funded by 4 couples from Our Lady Queen of Peace, a local Catholic church. We haven't solved the problem for the state or even the region, but we work throughout the region and have about 2,000 affordable homes and another 2,500 in development. We also work to create resident services. So when people live in our properties and they're struggling, we do things like help give them access to healthcare, to educational resources, to mental health needs. APA just did a special program with the Arlington Presbyterian Church to help people that had back rent in arrears from the pandemic, and actually did an eviction clinic with the church and with Arlington Thrive. So the nonprofit partners can do the housing and then more. And I'm just going to quickly go through 4 case studies of projects that I think were really creative and show in some ways the barriers that we have to face to create affordable housing, but also the opportunities. And 3 of them are actually with church partners. This was one of the first I got to work on when I came to APA. It already started in 2003, which was with the First Baptist Church of Clarendon. They now call themselves the Church at Clarendon. And they wanted to redevelop their facility. It was almost 100 years old, right across from the Clarendon Metro Station in the heart of Arlington. And it was a long process. There were like 8 lawsuits. The land use was very complicated. And I think Barbara wants to add in on that. But it was built in 2011 with all these combination of tools: state subsidy, the low-income housing tax credit, and local subsidy. Barbara.
I was just going to say, I actually chaired the board for 3 times when lawsuits came forward on this project. I was a strong advocate for this project. I partnered with the church. And what we found is it was really important to set up a separate nonprofit to manage the apartment building. So it was apart from the church. And that tool was put forward because we were getting a lot of pushback from neighbors about the separation of church and state, because public money was going to go into buying down these units. So we set up a separate nonprofit. And then from a zoning standpoint, to help most of the neighbors, I didn't help everybody, obviously we were sued, but many of the neighbors who had problems with the project from a visual standpoint, we made sure that the height was moved forward as much as possible so it faced our busiest thoroughfare and right near the metro. And the back of the project was no higher than what was required for a single family home. So that brought reasonable people to the table. Again, not everybody's reasonable, but it brought reasonable people to the table. So these were a couple of things that we worked on. And at the end of the day, this was an equity project as much as anything, because the church was located a stone's throw from a metro. And individuals who need affordable housing also need access to all the other amenities that other landowners or other homeowners would have. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, great. A lot of battle scars from some of these projects. This one wasn't quite as bumpy. And I actually think that the success of Views at Clarendon, later called V Point, created a little bit of a precedent. And the community said, well, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It took a little bit of the fear away. Affordable housing in the 21st century can be a really beautiful addition to the community. So APA worked with the Arlington Presbyterian Church. They had also a long journey, some of that internal, some of that their discussion between them and their governing body, the National Capital Presbytery. They made the decision to sell their entire parcel, or almost all of their parcel, and keep the sales proceeds to fund mission. So that turned into opening a new facility of 173 apartments in 2019. And a group that is partnering with them now is Our Stomping Ground, who we heard from in the prior week about housing persons with disabilities. There's a very robust on-site resident services program. And on the first floor, the Arlington Presbyterian Church came back and developed a very small and flexible worship space. And they are actively committed to working with the residents there. They're right now, for example, doing music classes. They've hired music instructors, and they work with young adults in the property and students to develop their musical skills. There's also another nonprofit on the first floor called Kitchen of Purpose, and they have a training kitchen, an incubator for small business development, and a public cafe. And at that grand opening, we were so excited. And you'll see Barbara's here on the right-hand side, helping to cut our ribbon. Another case study, this just opened literally in the last year, but I think it's interesting because it's a totally different group, but it's kind of in that same ballpark of a group that was land rich and somehow had grown weaker, let's put it honestly. Their membership had declined, which was the American Legion post 139. They owned 1.5 acres, actually very close to Clarendon and Virginia Square near George Mason University. They didn't have money to repair their roof, to repair their heat, and they wanted to do something mission related. And they went out and got proposals, and APA proposed to them, why don't we do affordable housing with you? Turned out to be 160 units, a lot of design discussions to get there, and create a condo for the Legion to come back on the first floor. And that opened last summer, and 50% of those units have a veterans preference, which there is a big appetite for this. So some of this journey is also finding who in the community is really struggling and isn't accessing affordable housing. And this is the most recent APA project. It's actually under construction now. So they've been finishing it off since I retired, but 144 committed affordable units that are across from the Ballston Metro station. And I can't tell you how complicated this was. It's right on top of the Metro tunnel. The church wanted to create a fairly robust size sanctuary, unlike Arlington Presbyterian. They wanted a full commercial kitchen. They run a Friday feeding program. They had a small preschool, Kinhaven. They wanted to expand that to 100 students. So we all talked about it was like trying to fit 10 items in the proverbial, small suitcase and pack them in. So it was really a design and construction challenge. But it also had some financing challenges. It was expensive to produce all of that in one 8-story building. But the Arlington County Board walked with this church, encouraged them at every step, helped them to figure out these problems of, how do we deal with putting a childcare center on the 2nd floor? How do we deal with the state regulations for light and air for play space? There's actually a very small cemetery on a corner of there. How do we preserve that and not disturb historic remains that they thought might be there? So all of this is part of the journey and the challenge of creating affordable housing, but there was so much enthusiasm among the elected leaders. This was after Barbara had left the county board, but I can say all of her, successors wanted to see this church succeed, wanted them to have not only new affordable housing, but new space for their preschool as well, and expanded opportunity. So this is the kind of journey that a lot of churches are in the middle of, but it also illustrates how important the government partnership is, how important it is to have elected leaders like Senator Frivola, who really care and are willing to go to the mat for complicated discussions, are willing to face neighbors that might be angry, that might even file a lawsuit. How important it is to have leadership. And I'm sorry, Andy has texted me. He's still not able to come back in, but talented leaders on the administrative side of our cities and counties in Virginia that are willing to work on complicated sites. And frankly, every site is complicated. I have never worked on an affordable housing project that there wasn't somebody somewhere who said, that's going to create more traffic, that's going to impact my school, I don't like the view of that, I liked what was there, whatever it is, I like the green trees there, I like the old church there. So it is a journey to help make affordable housing happen. And there's a bit of stigma there, which I think is so important for us as faith leaders to commit to, which is that this shouldn't be a stigmatized thing for people to have the housing they need. Yes, maybe they are coming out of homelessness, maybe they have disabilities, maybe it would have been nice if they had retirement savings and could move into Goodwin House, but not everyone does. And how do we treat our neighbors well? But we have a little bit of time because Andy still hasn't come back. So happy to have Barbara share some more, or even have some questions today too.
I'm happy to take questions because I may be able to work in my additional information as questions come forward. So it might be easier to have a conversation.
All right.
Could I ask a question regarding, Barbara was talking about some housing in which they'd have shared common space that sounded like the kitchen, that sounded like some other rooms that people don't normally think of as being shared. Because quite frankly, not everyone has the same approach towards keeping things clean or upkeep as someone else. So I was wondering if you could explore a little more about your experience with shared living spaces.
Well, I will say that I had been trying for years while I was on the county board to build some support for the model I just talked about, the single room occupancy model, because I was really committed to trying to help those who were homeless find stable housing, because I know that housing first is the absolute critical step to ensuring folks can then stay off the street, get the mental health services they might need or the other support services, and build their life. I did not succeed in finding enough community support, even in Arlington, to go forward with the model I described. But the offshoot of that conversation was maybe we provide more supportive, maybe we provide supportive services. So we called it supportive housing, but it was housing where individuals, like a social worker came in once a week, or a nurse came in to check to make sure somebody was taking medications and all that. So we did move into a supportive housing model, but I could not get the community to really adopt a single room occupancy where we would have been able to house more people, more efficiently. That just hasn't taken off yet. So there are some communities that have done it, but I could not get that done here in Arlington.
Barbara, we actually had a question in the chat box. I'm not sure I have an answer to it, but it's the Rouse estate that's right at the edge of Arlington near Seven Corners. The question was, why wasn't the county able to do affordable housing there, and why are they building $2 million new homes? Do you want to take a stab at
I'll
that?
take a stab at that. I am familiar with the site, and it is it's sort of near the Upton Regional Park, right? It's sort of diagonally across the street from it. It is a nice site. I don't know the answer to that, really. I mean, perhaps it was too expensive for the county to purchase, and then they would have had to work with a nonprofit to provide the housing. I don't think a nonprofit would have been able to purchase the property straight out. It would have had to have been a combination of purchasers. So that was part of it. I mean, it was a lot of land. It was, I'm sure, very, very expensively priced, and we have what we have. But to that point, this is where localities need to get involved in the affordable housing deals early, because if the nonprofit can't afford to buy the property, then you don't even have the door open to move forward for the affordable housing units. And I remember, Nina, you and others would come forward and say, we really want to purchase this and we just can't close the deal. So would the county be able to put money forward, we either bridge loan to allow you to purchase it, or some other way that you could make the deal work. So that, and some localities are providing, maybe you can get a tax credit in there to help offset the purchase of the property. But the locality has to be right there, right at the beginning, to make sure that the land or the building is purchased by an affordable housing provider.
And match the market price. So
that's the market. Yeah, see, that's the catch. You're up here in Northern Virginia, and the market price is extraordinarily high. And that's probably what happened with the Rouse property.
Right. Kat Turner, you have a question or comment?
I had lunch this week with a friend who lives in Alexandria, and which is now considering something like the Arlington missing middle proposal. And she brought up something that came up during the Arlington public discourse on it as well. And that is the tendency to say, if you're against this missing middle, you're racist. And that's your motivation for not doing it, not recognizing all of the other things that might factor into an individual's decision. And so we need to find a way to not stigmatize people who have opposition to it in such a way that it makes them dig in their heels and say, I'm not a racist. I just am concerned that there will be the impact on my economic investment in my house. And so just a sort of a thought for all of us as we're in our advocacy, to be respectful and not attribute motivations to people who are really good-hearted, but we haven't quite brought them along on this path yet. And what are the best ways to bring them along the path?
Yeah, I was going to comment on that. You know, I'm knocking on doors because I have a new Senate district, so I'm introducing myself to these new voters. And my new Senate district is now all of Arlington. So I've given up parts of Fairfax and Loudoun. So I'm talking to Arlington voters who are now new to my district, and this missing middle comes up quite a bit. And it's almost like the folks who are opposed to it just wanted some assurances. It's like they wanted to ensure that there wouldn't be these negative impacts. You know, what about parking? Will there be so many cars that I won't be able to comfortably park my car? Or will we have all renters who won't care about keeping up the building next door, et cetera, et cetera? So there are some, you know, very legitimate concerns. And I think the more we can focus on the actual potential impact and how to address those impacts of the project and less on people's motivation, then I think you can get the conversation to a place where, you know, you can maybe come to a compromise. And interestingly enough, a couple people who were very much in favor of missing middle said to me, why didn't the county at least require a contribution from the developer to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? Which was an interesting comment. And I said, that's a very good comment, because at least you could point to a significant public benefit, not just increasing the supply of housing, which is not going to be affordable in any relative sense. What, you know, that was a very good question, I thought, and something that I'm surprised didn't get enough debate.
Interesting. Well, it's the time we usually break out into small groups, but we're not too big a group today. Would folks prefer to kind of keep having a conversation together? Does that make sense? Okay, but I want to encourage those of you that you know, have your camera off to join in and be part of. Oh, thank you, Danielle, for answering that. Bruce, you had something. So we're going to continue as a Q&A of the whole today. Bruce, you had something you put in the chat box. You want to talk about your experience with affordable housing? My prompt question, by the way, was, you know, what can the faith community do? So we can work on that or keep talking about government. So
yes, well, I think that's a really good focus. Nina knows that we've been talking about affordable housing as an issue out here in the northern Piedmont region, which is Loudoun and northern Fauquier. And Loudoun is just urban enough and part of the DC metro area that some of the resources that are available in Arlington are available in Loudoun too, but not so much in Fauquier. And so I've been doing some more research there. And I've been thinking, hearing the conversation about how things have happened in Arlington reminds me of conversations out here in Fauquier. It's exactly the same situation. We just have more land, but our more land is pretty expensive too. So same issues. I think the difference is our faith communities don't have the same sort of resources. 2 acres in the town of the Plains would be worth a fair amount, but our church, Grace Church in the town of the Plains, occupies its 2 acres. And we're not going to tear our building down. Maybe in 50 years, we'll have to be thinking about it.
Mhm, mhm. All right. Well, thank you, Bruce.
Yeah.
Bob Clark, you posted something.
Yes, I want to take advantage of the governmental focus today and just ask, I'm in Falls Church City and we're doing one of these missing middle discussions as well. I'm curious, what is the local government's incentive to bring in affordable housing? Part of what we're seeing is a very close alignment of the city government representatives, particularly the people who are writing the drafts of the potential regulations, and the developers. They keep putting stuff in that is by right, and it just makes me wonder, why not? Is there anything in the larger legislation or regulations that make it a good idea for the city government to put out equitable, affordable housing?
I'm not sure I totally understand your question, Bob, but I will say that as a person who did project development, the more you do by right, the more likely you are to get it. Because public hearings themselves slow projects down, open them to a long negotiation, and tend to water down your goals. So, if you're serious about something, I want more affordable housing in my community, or in the missing middle, I really want to see duplexes and triplexes, you make it as easy as possible. You don't say you have to file a notice, you have to have a public hearing, that all that adds up, legal time, potential to be derailed. So that might be why the by right focus is in the city of Falls Church, because they really want to see some of these changes. I don't know if you agree with that, Barbara.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I was going to say something very, very similar. They just want to make it easy. And remember this, the missing middle is merely about increasing the supply of affordable housing. It's not necessarily going to be affordable to the groups I talked about earlier. It might be relatively more affordable than, a very large single family home that, Bob, probably goes for what, $2 million. I mean, if you get 4 units on a lot, maybe they'll only go for $700,000, So it might be relatively more affordable. It's not going to be affordable to the workforce base that I referred to earlier. But yeah, Nina's absolutely right. They're trying to increase the supply. I just want to note too, though, in reaction to some of the concerns that neighbors had for the missing middle in Arlington, the county capped the number of projects to 58 per year for 5 years under the missing middle ordinance.
Mhm.
So it's almost like they're trying a pilot in their own way by capping it.
Right. Stephanie, do you want to share your comment or question? I see you put something in the chat.
I was just saying, I believe bringing the gap between families' income to meet their rent costs. So I could just imagine if your hourly rate or even a salary that's below the means and the rent is high, this is where you get your struggle. And already as a family or an individual, just to meet with the basic needs of food, clothing, transportation, it somewhat makes it, the day-to-day living, hardship. But I do believe just finding a way to bridge the gap between one's income to meet and match the rent.
You're spot on, and the data shows us that rents and home prices have increased much faster than incomes. That's been a very dramatic trajectory over the last 30 years. So people that could afford the average rent in Arlington when I moved there, there's to say how long ago that was, 1983, was $500. You could find lots and lots of apartments for $500. And I was a new employee in a making $25,000 a year. And that was $500 was very affordable for me. Now, today, we still have young people moving into Arlington making $25,000, $35,000 a year. Our minimum wage hasn't gone up since 2009. You know, our many of our entry level wages haven't gone up that much. And a low cost apartment in Arlington is more like $1,300, you know, more than double that. I see another comment in the chat box. I'll just go in order here. Bart Naylor. Bart, you want to share your comment? Oh. You want to unmute?
Yeah, but you know, it's March Madness. I didn't want to talk.
Is
So
that?
You're
Yeah,
not the
but
only
it-
one missing it.
it's halftime. The good team is behind, or my team is behind. So I'll just read my chat. So is it in everyone's self-interest to have their home values rise? And if that's true, does missing middle help or hurt?
Well, I would say neighbors who, even though they complain about paying their property tax, they would rather have their assessments go up and pay the higher tax than not have their assessments go up, because they know their asset is growing. So I don't know if the missing middle, I would argue that it probably will not affect assessments at all, because our affordable housing projects nestled in our neighborhoods have not affected our assessments. I mean, negatively, and our assessments continue to go up. I'll take my own home as an example. I live in Lion Village. Veach Street sort of separates sort of Colonial Village, which it's a big development with lots of market rate affordable units. And the other side of the street is my street, which is part of this, you know, single family Lion Village neighborhood. And my assessment has not been affected at all by being very close to a multi-family lower income project. So
I think my response would be there is so much demand for housing. I can't imagine that if you own a home and they build a sixplex down the street, that your home is going to go down in value. And in fact, it may even go up, because a developer might say, oh, well, I would buy your home for, I don't know, 800,000 as is, or I would buy it for 900,000 and maybe build a sixplex on it. So it feels, yeah.
Let me just add to that. You know, developers have already approached us and said, you know, if this missing middle goes, we're willing to pay quite a bit, because we're not, this is a point that some of you might appreciate. The actual zoning that would allow the multifamily homes does not take place until the landowner asks for it. So I'm not paying more in property taxes because they can allow up to 6 units. That doesn't happen till the developer buys my lot, and then he asks for he pays the zoning a requirement, if you will, for the 6 units. Did you know that, Nina? So
I did not know that.
yeah, so in effect, as the homeowner of a single family lot gains a whole lot through this missing middle, because they can essentially sell to a developer who can build 6 units, and so their land becomes more
But they won't be
valuable.
taxed on it. So,
Yeah, and they won't be taxed on it.
well,
That's
I think we have time for one more question, and I see Babette put something in the chat box. Babette, do you want to share your question?
There we go. I'm just kind of curious, because one thing I've never heard anybody talk about, but it seemed in this area, but it seems that this is a viable alternative. because I've done it, I've seen it in Colorado, and I think there's a lot of it in, not a lot, some in New England, and that's called co-op housing. Where you have a mix of both market rate and some small and some subsidized units, or subsidized units. And I've never heard anybody talk about that. And it seems to me that that could be a very viable alternative on small lots.
I think that's really intriguing. And I would love if you want to share the example you know from Colorado. I know a little bit about, it's really a rental product, not a co-op ownership, but there is a developer in DC that has done what I would kind of call, yuppie group homes.
Yeah.
And so, very nice bedroom and bath, and like 8 of them, and then one shared big kitchen and living area. And I think people are kind of intrigued by that, as historically, a lot of communities they were called boarding houses. They banned boarding houses by code, including Arlington County. And they're sort of reopening that idea as another form of shared housing. But I haven't heard of it in a co-op. Barbara, I don't know if you have.
No, I haven't either. But it's interesting. I mean, by law, 4 unrelated individuals can live in a single family home. I mean,
This is
expanding that
co-op.
to a few more, I don't think that, I think that's a great idea, but I have not, co-ops, at least in Virginia, based on some of our banking regulations and all that, it has been very difficult to finance co-ops in Virginia. New York is a different situation, but I've been told that getting financing for a co-op is a challenge. Now, I don't know if that's going to change, but right now that seems to be a barrier.
All right. Well, we're at the end of our time. Some people need to get back to their March Madness
Yeah.
game. There is no class next week. We're celebrating Easter. Our next class is in 2 weeks, Sunday, April 16th. I've got 3 really amazing speakers coming to talk about advocacy, including Marjorie Green, who is a leader of Voice in Arlington, and Kim Bobo, who is the head of the Interfaith Center on I'm not sure what policy in Richmond.
It's the Virginia Interfaith Center. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's
And I'm having a blank moment on the 3rd, but we have 3 great speakers. So I hope you come back in 2 weeks. And as we started with a poem, we wanted to end with a scripture reading. And Barbara.
okay. Thank you, Nina. This is a scripture reading from Matthew chapter 5. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Nina. You were a great moderator.
And I'm sorry for this mix up. Andy sent us his apologies. His router is not working, but we do have his slides. So if you want to go to that website that we have, we'll have all this data on the slides. And of course, this last slide here where I tried to put some websites you can go to find out what government is doing. But we thank you for coming. Thank you, Senator Favola, for participating. Thank you
so much
for introducing us. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
All righty.
See you in a couple weeks.
Okay, thanks.